Alright, hello, I'm going to be talking about the MPAA. Are my values accurately depicted by the MPAA? No. A lot of mature content I see differently, like I see swearing completely different from nudity. It doesn't make sense to me that they're like together in the same rating system or the same credibility system, whatever the MPAA uses.
Are values accurately depicted by the MPAA when it comes to sexual and violent content?
Absolutely not. Especially here in America. I think that America's a little backwards when it comes to sex and violence. For some reason, in this culture, violence is totally A-okay.
We're just really comfortable with it.
Yeah. When it comes to sex, that's a no-go. Which is weird because sex is totally natural, but yet people seem to be afraid of it in this country.
It's kind of like a taboo subject.
Yeah. Totally should be switched around. I'd be more worried if my child was watching someone's head getting blown off by a shotgun than opposed to two people that love each other and they're doing it. You know, I really don't see the problem with that.
Are your values accurately depicted by the MPAA when it comes to sexual and violent content? I would say absolutely not. They rate sexuality and nudity like way stricter than they rate violence, and honestly, baby making should not be a taboo, while taking someone's life and murdering someone definitely should be. Like, that shouldn't be something that we just, brush off the shoulder. He just killed like 400 people. It's okay, he's Jason Statham. It doesn't matter. But let's say in the movie But I'm a Cheerleader, if we have how old is she, like 18-year-old girl who's trying to discover herself, trying to discover her sexuality, and she decides to masturbate while against a wall, and all we get to see is her hand going down on top of her nightgown and her face. Like, just totally focus on her face, and it was a really important part to the plot. Like, you got to see her develop. She was kind of a different character after she had that intimate moment with herself. Yet, that was not going to be released into theaters because it was too sexual.
The MPAA can't represent what, as a society, what we believe is appropriate, our morals, our ethics, everything in a movie, as far as what's appropriate, because they're not part of the public. They're not accountable to us in any way. They're an organization formed by the 6 large conglomerates that make up the MPAA. And so they're the largest production studios there are, and so there's no way for them to have a solid connection with the public.
So can the views of the MPAA adequately reflect the views of society?
I don't think it can. I mean, the MPAA has groups of people that are supposed to represent the average American family, but who is the average American family? There's so much diversity in this country. There's not that stereotypical mom and dad, two children. There's gays and lesbian couples. There's divorced couples, single parents, married couples with different personalities, different kids, different situations. You can't represent everyone, and to have these groups of people all the same type, straight mother or father with 2 kids, it can't adequately represent the whole country.
Views of the MPAA adequately reflect the views of society. They can, but they don't. It seems like the MPAA is this group of people that want to push their belief system onto the rest of America, and they want America to follow what they think is right. But it's a little illogical. Back to the whole baby making should not be a taboo, while murdering is just rolls off the tongue and we don't think anything of it. It's like, whose values are those? Those seem so backwards. I mean, don't they? I don't think you can argue that having sex is not in human nature, but I definitely think you could argue that murdering another person is not in human nature. Because there's plenty of people, millions of people that get along just fine not doing it. Well, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a million people who get along just fine without sex. Either with themselves or with other people. Doesn't matter, but sex.
Does the MPAA reflect the views of the society? I would say it counters what the society wants. You know, the society seems fine with swearing and nudity and all that, and the MPAA, for some reason, wants us to not be accustomed to that, which we already are. So no, it's necessarily doing the exact opposite of what our society is accustomed to.
Do you see any pending conflicts with an organization such as the MPAA with your films in the future?
Yeah, I definitely see future problems with a rating system like this. I have a feeling I'm going to get a lot of NC-17 ratings on future films. Distributors and studios they want nothing to do with that because they can't market it. Basically, no one's going to see your film if it's NC-17. So then I would have to severely cut down on the stuff I want in my film. It limits the content we could put out, which in turn limits a lot of the stories we can tell. Because they say we're free to make whatever we want with whatever content, but the problem is if we have too much sex or too much violence, usually it's always about sexual content, they give the highest rating NC-17, and the problem with the NC-17 rating is distributors are not going to touch that, so that no one gets to see your film, which limits your audience, and you're kind of stuck. No one's going to support you with an NC-17 rating. Even R, it would limit your audience. So it puts a burden on filmmakers. They have to cut their content, or they just can't do certain stories because the ratings won't allow it.
How does the MPAA rating system affect independent filmmakers such as yourself? The MPAA likes to tell independent filmmakers to fuck themselves, basically. Because independent filmmakers like to push the buttons of society, and they want to get information out there that makes people feel good about themselves. Like, again, But I'm a Cheerleader. That film is about a lesbian realizing she's a lesbian and being comfortable with that and not bending to society telling her that she can't be that. It's like, one of those self-realization films, and that's something that teenagers need a lot of because that's that time where you're trying to find yourself, and these days it's a lot harder for teenagers because we're just constantly stimulated by video games, movies, TV, the internet. There's not a lot of time for us to just be ourselves and really think through things. And I think films are a great way to help a lot of teens find their way. MPAA doesn't like that. They don't like the LGBT community. They definitely don't like seeing women enjoy sex in films. It's like, oh my gosh, how many times do you watch a sex film where you get to see the guy finish? Just about every time. And when do you get to see the female finish? Not very often. It's like teaching girls that yes, sex is this thing that adults do, but you're not there to really enjoy it. Like, sex is not about you. Sex is about the guy getting off, and then you're just supposed to, like, be pretty and stuff, be into it, but you don't have to finish. You're not that important. You're a second-class citizen. You don't matter that much. So yeah, the MPAA makes it really, really hard for independent filmmakers to get out what they're passionate about.
Do I see a conflict with the MPAA with my films in the future? Can't really say. I can't tell you what movies I'm going to make in the future. I have no idea if I'm going to make a movie with a bunch of nudity or swearing. I will point out if I do, then I'm going to have a good reason for it, so if I feel like it's necessary, then I'll fight for it.
Do you see any pending conflicts with an organization such as the MPAA with your films in the future? the MPAA is gonna hate me. Because I'm gonna push for my films a lot, and I love stuff that pushes the buttons of society, you know, or explores the taboos of society. That's what I really love. That's what I'm really passionate about.
Would you want a piece of your mature content censored out even if it was crucial to the narrative?
If that was my movie, I'd despise having to cut out a major plot line because the MPAA wouldn't allow it. And I feel for other filmmakers who have to deal with that. Would I be willing to make certain adjustments to get a better rating? Yeah, little adjustments here and there, but when they want to change the tone of the film or cut out something essential, I'd be totally opposed to that. And sometimes you get stuck where it's like, well, if you're opposed to that, they want you to cut it, and if you're not going to cut it well, your film doesn't get seen. So it depends on, I guess, the integrity you have, if you want to stand up for that or if you're willing to make those cuts. I personally wouldn't. Story is very important to me, so okay. I'd have to say no.
If a piece of mature content that is censored out is crucial to the narrative, then I would say it doesn't have a right to be taken out. I mean, it's obviously crucial to the narrative. It's important to the story, and if it's cut out for whatever mature content was into it, then it would essentially ruin the narrative and take a chunk out of it that was important to the story.
Would you want a piece of mature content censored out even if it is crucial to the narrative? Hell no! What's the point of telling a story if you're not going to tell all of it? So I went to the store one day and I bought this potato and then I went home. Well, you're missing a pretty big part of the story. Why did you bother to tell me that story if you're just going to leave out something important? That's just stupid. Form the rating system and replace it with a brand new system. What would you implement? Well, that's really tough. In a perfect world, I would rate nudity and sexuality a lot less strict because I would want that to be something that society becomes comfortable with. And I would have brutal violence a lot more higher on the stricter scale. It really bugs me how much we censor not only female sexuality, but sexuality in general. And I mean, America's not the only country that does it, but a lot of countries have done a lot better job. Like in France, one of my favorite films is called The Anatomy of Hell, and it is by the French director Catherine Breillat. I think you could say it's one of the first movies to ever show a close-up of a woman's vulva. You know, you see tons of penises in movie, like even if they're just rated R. I mean, you get to see Will Ferrell's testicles and Step Brothers. Go in the room! I will go don't miss a spot! That's rated R, and that's just lovely. Anyways, in her film, yeah, it's one of the first shots of the vulva, and I think it's also probably one of the first shots of vaginal secretions. Like, that word doesn't sound pretty, but that's what it is. There's this really, it's not even that sexual. It really isn't, because the movie is about who's about to commit suicide in the bathroom of a club, and this gay man comes in and he rescues her basically, and they talk throughout the night, and she says, well, I will pay you to spend 4 nights with me. They explore sexuality with each other, but at the same time it's not sexual because he's not attracted to her, she's not attracted to him, but it's kind of like exploring and appreciating the human body. And there's this scene where they're about to explore and do stuff. He sticks his finger in, and there's this close-up of his fingers, and she was getting excited, and there's the proof that she was getting excited. And like something like that would never, ever, ever, ever happen on the silver screen in America if the MPAA ratings stay the same. And yet there's so many cum jokes for guys. Like, there's so many movies where like there's just a wave of semen or something, you know, and that's totally acceptable. But we just can't see that from women. So my perfect rating system would encourage films to be tasteful about the curse words that they use, and it would definitely discourage using too much gratuitous violence in like a real setting. Like, I think fantasy violence is a little different. If there's no blood and they're not humans, I mean, it's still teaching to kill, but it just doesn't seem as brutal as a war movie where you just see so much death. But even then, I don't think there should be rated R where you have to be 18 and older. I think by 16 you've seen about everything. I mean, there is to see whether your parents approve of it or not. But I definitely do think there's some violence that kids under the age of like 16 or 15 really should not be exposed to. But that's just me. And then I would be doing almost the same thing that the MPAA does by pushing my values on society. So it's really hard to decide. So maybe they should just have advising warnings for parents, but not put you have to be 16 or you have to be 18 to see this. I mean, maybe parents need to step up and, actually take charge. And if they don't like what their child is going to the movies to see, then they need to be a part of the child's life and not leave it up to the MPAA. Because I don't think they're doing a very good job.
If I could completely reform the rating system and replace it with a brand new system, what would I implement? I would probably make it more specific. I would set different ratings depending on swearing and nudity. Like, it wouldn't just say G, PG, R. It would say like how much, what kind of swearing is in it, and then like another part would say like how much nudity is in it and like how much violence is in it. So I would rate the different specific areas of mature content, and I wouldn't try to. I wouldn't want to regulate it and stop people from seeing it because of that. I would rather just have a rating system that just lets you know, like, hey, this content is in it. Just heads up. But I wouldn't want that to stop someone from seeing the film.
How the MPAA rating system works is that for a film to be shown in a movie theater, it must be submitted to the MPAA to first review it and give it a rating. And so they have to approve it to allow the movie theater to play it. These movie theaters, the reason this is because these movie theaters have an agreement with the MPAA that if they are to continue getting MPAA rated films into their movie theater, they can't accept anything that doesn't go through them. And so the problem here is that since this organization is controlled by the 6 largest conglomerates in the industry, they have 100% monopoly power over what gets produced, because anything that doesn't get into the movie theaters is most likely not going to succeed, and not many people are going to see it. And so here we have a problem where they've come across this before in the Supreme Court, where they had a problem in it was the 40s that they actually had a monopoly case in the Supreme Court against the original Big Three that first started the MPAA and ended up breaking them up somewhat because they're so powerful. And now it's come full circle back to that, because these independent filmmakers who are trying to make these films, the MPAA is not approving them because it doesn't like what they're saying. With myself as a filmmaker, I do a lot of film work and everything there, but how it's going, I think the MPAA will actually affect me much more and more of my everyday life in that kind of area, but not me necessarily actually making films. More of where I think it's going to affect me is in privacy and stuff like that, and what disturbs me the most is that they have the amount of political power that they have. And there's several bills in the past that were really big, but not many people realize just how much power the MPAA had behind these bills. One was the SOPA, and that was to basically to try and stop piracy, but in doing so, eliminating a lot of privacy laws and stuff like that. And so this sort of stuff from the MPAA goes all the way back to the 80s. They were completely against the VCR, the video cassette recorder. And so their whole idea was that now people could take a movie that was made and make an illegal copy of it and sell it themselves. And the president at the time compared that to the Boston Strangler, as far as the threat it played against the American public and the industry, which may sound a little strange because, as we all know, the VCR wasn't some menace sitting in your household waiting to strangle people. It was a very useful tool where we recorded TV shows and stuff. So that whole idea, I think, is ridiculous, and it's irritating because they've taken that idea and made it worse and worse by now not only just trying to control the very DVDs and stuff, they're going online and are pushing raids. They put so much political pressure on the government in the U.S. that they've been raiding different websites, and arresting people involved in piracy. And piracy is illegal, but without this political pressure, most of these raids would not be taking place, especially in the way that they're happening, because at this point, one of the only reasons why it's happening is because the MPAA sees it as such a threat. And the very fact that they can do that is ridiculous. That a private organization can do that doesn't make any sense to me. I think the best solution to this would be to completely restructure the MPAA, and what I would love is it to be a movie rating organization again. If we were to have a state-run a committee that all it does is review films, doesn't give it approval or denial, but just says this is what the audience is, this is what type of audience it's appropriate for. If their only power was to simply rate a film, not control who made it, not control who sees it, not control where it goes, none of that, I would be much happier, because I would know that the people who are behind the scenes making sure that these films are okay don't have their own agendas that they're pushing while we're depending on them for this sort of service.
So that is about all I have to say for the MPAA and its impact on movies and society. And thank you for watching.